price in the U.S. will go up exponentially. Let's take a look at this. A quick glance at fuel prices. The United States are roughly, it's now about $3 here. And also in Berlin, London, Paris, it's $6 to $7 typically. In other words, at least twice, in some cases 3 times as much. So the whole appetite for dollars is, well, this is just one. So that is leading to serious discussion and planning for a global currency issued by a global central bank. They can't get there easily. They'll probably create a basket of some kind. But what's interesting, the G7 is meeting in secret without the U.S. president. So they're not stupid. They've got to do something. But they know they've got to get away from the U.S. dollar being the world's world currency. From their point of view. Way back in 1994, David Rockefeller said, while addressing the United Nations General Assembly, all the world needs is the right major crisis, and the nations of the world will embrace the New World Order. The debt crisis we see happening is not limited to the United States. Europe's got huge problems. The difference is they are moving to correct them. They're imposing austerity programs. They're starting to do things. Will they be enough to save the euro? Nobody's sure. But at least they're moving in the right direction. They're not adding debt. They're reducing costs. And that's painful, but it's essential. China has stimulus packages. They're paid for out of cash. The cashier says that China increased 40% in the last quarter. They're paying out cash, not debt. Well, the reason I want to paint this picture is you and I, when we travel for years, when we travel, we usually have, after we speak, we have a question and answer period, and we'll throw it open for questions in the audience. And there are 2 questions that are predictable that always come up. First question is, where is the United States in prophecy? Anybody that studied prophecy seriously recognizes 2 things. That all the major players in the end times are well identified. We have some different views about timing details, what have you. But the players, there's very little dispute over today. But America is conspicuous in no apparent mention. There's contrived answers to that, but they don't really hold up inspection. So where's American prophecy? The answer is we're not. Iran is, we're not. So we can go through some others. The second question that comes up, a related kind of question, why hasn't God judged America? Billy Graham put it so colorfully several decades ago. If God doesn't judge America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. Great soundbite. I don't target. Thomas Jefferson said the same thing back in 1781. I tremble for my country when I recall that God is just, and his justice will not sleep forever. So anybody that's spiritually sensitive realizes God's judgment is overdue in a sense. We live in grace and his mercy. Praise God. And I'm not putting a limit on that. I'm just pointing out that we're already, in a sense, on borrowed time. There are eschatological implications for what we're seeing going around the world. The global currency is emerging. It's being forced. In fact, many would argue it's being engineered. One of the most disturbing things, and I'm not going to get into this in detail here, because I think we got more important things to talk about, but is all of this being deliberately engineered? Some say yes. There's a lot of evidence that it is. The problem isn't the bomb, it's the power behind it. And they have an agenda to do what? To break American down, because it's in the way. That's the agenda that's being called. Forward hidden strategy. Look it up on Google and on the internet. And this leads to global currency and sets the stage for a global leader. Don't waste your time trying to figure out who he is. I don't waste any time on that. Why? Because if I read 2 Thessalonians 2 correctly, he won't be revealed until after the rapture. So don't waste your time. That's a prerequisite, so don't waste your time. So the reason I get into, why am I getting into all this here? I'm not here to question, I'm here to prepare you to rearrange your citizenship. This has ministry implications. I believe people will be unprepared for the challenges ahead because of the deceit in the media and the myopia of the so-called professionals. People, though, are going to be desperate and looking for answers, and you need to be prepared to respond to that. It's going to be the biggest opportunity of your life.
Yes.
My wife and I finished a book, a book called The Kingdom, Power, and Glory, and we were startled at how it's being received in China. It's being embraced very aggressively for some interesting reasons. In China, they believe that they are in the kingdom of preparation, and what we call the millennium, they call the kingdom of inheritance. And they've been taught, Christians that have been taught, that the responsibilities and authorities, what have you, in the coming kingdom derive from their faithfulness in this one. They call that a kingdom perspective. I think that's fascinating. That's exactly what they regard the book that Dan and I wrote as a paraphrase of the writings of Dr. Timothy Lin, which is the primary influence of most of the Chinese Christians. We know that in the last days, perilous times will come. We shouldn't be surprised by this. Paul tells Timothy, evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. So why are we surprised? As we compare the elections of the last few decades, each election, the corruption, the lies, the deceit, the deceit in the media has gone from just being biased to deliberate withholding the truth.
Yes.
Astonishing. As India and China rise, the United States is going to witness a fundamental transformation. People's Bank of China is already calling the word to replace the dollar. That's pretty old news. Most of you have seen our materials, know about the cycle that's first articulated by Alexander Tyler back in 1781. How nations go from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, and from courage to liberty, and from liberty produces abundance. That certainly has been our history. It's produced an abundance that was the envy of the world. Watch out for envy in spiritual places. That abundance leads to complacency. That complacency leads to apathy. And I often point out that you go down the street and ask the average American, what is the biggest problem in America? Is it ignorance or is it apathy? The person will say, I don't know and I don't care. And apathy leads to dependency, and we already have half the population dependent on the government goal already. And that dependency, of course, leads back to bondage. That's the cycle. Where are we? That cycle, we go from 4 or 5 major studies of history. They all conclude the average cycle of a nation, they have a life cycle, they're typically about 2 centuries. About 2 centuries. What's our life cycle? About 2 centuries. Are we over? Possible. Possible. I wouldn't forego the possibility that God is sovereign and He can bring us a revival without manipulation. But America is at the moment in moral freefall. We're victims, not of financial problems or even military ones. These are symptoms. Any businessman will tell you cash flow is not a problem, it's a symptom. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. These are our real problem is spiritual. The word spiritual warfare. We have a media that's masking the truth. The purpose of the media is to inform the electorate. And we have a media that hides the truth from the people. We have courts that pervert justice. The corruption of courts is astounding. All levels. All the way up. We have schools that are deliberately dumbing down our youth. I used to think that the education system was just getting increasingly inefficient. We put more and more money in and then poorer and poorer product. I never realized that was planned that way. And I hope you don't believe me. Check it out yourself. Do some research. You'll be shocked what you find. We've replaced our traditional heritage, the heritage that made this country great, with multiculturalism, revisionism, and values relativism. The pursuit of truth used to be the great champion charge of the youth. Pursue truth in whatever form. Now we deny its existence, and we're surprised that we have a rudderless youth. Now patriotism, this one gets to me. When my contemporaries were in college, I was passing the uniform to field of mail cap. Passing me for whatever dignitary was visiting Washington that Wednesday. When you spend 4 years at the Naval Academy, and then you go to the service, that gets in your blood. After my service career, I was in the intelligence community, think tanks, and even in my corporate life, I was chairman and CEO of 4 different publicly traded defense companies. So I'm not an American passion. I did have discovered over the years that the only people that have any grasp of our heritage are people who grew up in a military family.